day. Okay, thank you everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Degree Alumni Webinar Series. These sessions are designed to give you the opportunity to connect with alumni from the basic medical sciences departments as they share their unique career journeys and practical advice from their professional experiences. We will be running these webinars during this winter term. So I highly encourage you to check our website, which I'm gonna type in the chat in a second, to keep up any of the new sessions that we're gonna have for the rest of the term, or even for the next academic year if you're still around at Western. We are so glad that you were able to join us today, and thank you for starting the conversation already. Um, we encourage you to participate and think about how the insights shared today might apply to your own career and academic pathway. Today's session will begin with a presentation with our alumni speaker, Jennifer Angie, followed by a Q&A, where you will have the chance to ask your own questions and learn directly from her experience. Jennifer, thank you again for being here today, and feel free to start.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Maria, for the introduction. So my name is Jennifer, and I am an alumni. As she mentioned, I've been away for quite some time, but that's neither here nor there. It's I always love speaking with Western students and talking about my career path, as well as even my academic adventure that I went on. So just to kind of in general overall, I haven't had the straightest pathway with regards to whether it was academics or with regards to my professional career. I've kind of taken, I don't want to say the scenic route, but various routes along the way. But I am very proud of what I have accomplished throughout my academic and professional career thus far, and it's been a journey, right? And so what I'll do today is I'll kind of summarize, kind of academically at a high level what I did, and then secondly to that, and more probably the brunt or the I guess the content, the main content of it is actually my professional career and where that has taken me thus far. And then lastly, I'll finish off with kind of advice for those that are looking into going into industry. And maybe if I can provide some advice beyond what I've presented, then by all means, I'm happy to do that. So with that said, I'm going to start off with my education here. So give me one second. Let me just move to the next slide here. So looking at my education, so I actually have 2 degrees. One is actually through Western in the medical science background. I actually have a background in physiology. And then secondly, I have an engineering degree in mechanical engineering, also done at Western. I did my undergrad research at the Hand and Upper Limb Center at St. Joe's. So I have a huge connection there, grateful for that, and kind of pursued graduate studies as well within that. But something else to highlight to kind of differentiate a little bit of not just my academic and career itself is actually I was a Western Mustang. And by that, I mean, I actually played squash. So I was a varsity squash player. It definitely helped me throughout my education in the sense of kind of keeping me that work, we call it now work-life balance, right? So for me, it kind of kept me sane, and it was a way for me to continue to pursue my like non-academic activities and stay fit. So I think that's a really important part of my life, not just getting my 2 degrees from Western, but also kind of the extracurriculars in itself. So I'm going to go into my professional career, and this is going to be a little bit more extensive because I've had, as I mentioned, quite the journey overall. And so I would say most of my career, my nine years was at Smith+Nephew. And so with Smith+Nephew, the reason how I actually got into Smith+Nephew is as I was doing my volunteer research at the Hand and Upper Limb Center, throughout my mechanical engineering degree, I was able to connect with industry leaders. And so from that, I had mentioned to my supervisor, Dr. Jim Johnson, that I was interested in industry. And so through that, he had already known. And when Smith+Nephew came to us for research, he had mentioned my name. And from there, they basically kind of impromptu interviewed me as I was doing some testing. And with that said, I actually ended up getting a job with them. And the rest is history at this point. So that actually allowed me to move to Boston, to the US, and actually start my professional career. And I've been here ever since in the US. So I would say, before I get into the products that I worked on, another highlight, as part of my academic career, I actually did an internship within my mechanical engineering degree. And so what that enabled me to do, I worked 16 months in a medical device company, though I was vying for orthopedics, and that's where my trajectory and where I wanted to go into. I actually worked in separately a totally different realm, still medical devices, but actually with inhalers, with COPD patients and with asthma. So I got to do testing. I got to learn about the product life cycle, got to, learn about all the different types of departments within engineering, as well within engineering or within the medical device industry. So it was really good exposure for me to see what the medical device industry is all about, especially when it comes to regulatory and the FDA. So bringing it back, I moved to Boston and worked at Smith+Nephew as a development engineer. And so you can see here on the left-hand side, the two products I actually designed, developed, and actually ended up launching on a global scale. So that means people actually use it today in the OR, or surgeons use it today, is the meniscal root repair system, where you actually tack back on the posterior root back onto the knee itself. And that typically happens, or potentially happens, when you have an ACL tear. And so with that force, it actually causes what isn't necessarily seen as a meniscal root tear. Secondly, I actually worked on the extendo button. It's a fixation device specifically for ACL reconstruction. So you can kind of see here where the ACL is actually reconstructed. You use the button on the tibia, which is the lower part of the knee itself. So through that experience, I was able to basically go through what is the early phases of product development, where pen and paper, talking to a surgeon, defining what user needs, what user requirements are, into creating a prototype as a solution to those and fulfilling those needs. From there, doing iterations, so going into a cadaver lab, for example, and actually testing out the physical prototypes in its various iterations, and getting feedback as a surgeon would attend these cadaver labs. And then from there, finalizing the product, having and knowing what the design is, and then becoming project manager and managing all the different stakeholders, including, for example, manufacturing, regulatory, quality, packaging, marketing, all those stakeholders, and managing and into what is now globally launched and used around the world. So again, I'm very proud of that, having the opportunity to work on those and being very impactful in the sports medicine world, as well as obtaining a few patents along the way. So very exciting on that. From there, I actually pivoted my career from product development as an engineer into what is product management. And so with that said, I actually pivoted to total knee reconstruction. So you'll see here, I have the journey to total knee arthroplasty, which is the implant itself, plus the robotic assisted surgical system called Navio. It isn't called Navio anymore, but back then that's what I worked on. And so what I actually ended up doing is I had the opportunity to move from Boston to the West Coast. So I moved to Seattle. And what that enabled me to do is actually being responsible for the whole West region of the US. So from north and south, Colorado, all the way to Hawaii, I was able to go into the OR and teach surgeons how to do a total knee reconstruction, whether it was from manual instruments or using this robotic platform. So it was a great way for me to learn about communication skills. But another thing too, which was very interesting and exciting for me, was having done product development, I actually was able to fulfill the product life cycle. And by that, I mean, when I had launched the product, that's, the products out in the market. But in this case, I actually had the product in hand, being the journey to knee implant, and actually spoke with surgeons to get feedback to then relay that back to the engineers for the next iteration of the implant itself. So I actually have had the full product life cycle experience. So it was really, really enlightening from that perspective, but it also gave me the opportunity to be in the OR even more so and understand and appreciate all the dynamics of the OR, as well as the sales reps that work in that, and really how the surgeons kind of think on the fly when it comes to different surgical procedures. Outside of that, I continued my journey as a product manager and pivoted into total hip reconstruction. And so I went into a more, rather than a technical product manager, as I did with the total knee reconstruction, I went into more, I would say, what you would say as a common marketing manager, more along the marketing side and business side of things. So what I ended up doing is I actually created a campaign, a marketing campaign for the ABLE approach, which is the anterior approach, and teaching the surgeons how to do an advanced anterior approach that is muscle sparing for hip arthroplasty or hip reconstruction. And so I had to work with several surgeons, key opinion leaders or KOLs in our case, and actually derived a medical education course and where they were teaching how to do this technique. This was their expertise, and I would be in the course, preparing all the cadavers, preparing all the course content, collaborating with medical education on that, as well as creating marketing materials such as a technique guide, a user manual, as well as like a one-page marketing one-page marketing piece that would explain the whole technique itself. So with that said, that was my whole career within Smith+Nephew, so about 9 years. From that corporate experience, I decided to pivot, try something different, and actually went into consulting. So that's where my next step went into, which was Verinex. So Verinex is a consulting firm for MedTech. And so from there, I actually was able to leverage both my communication skills from my product management experience, as well as my product development experience, and worked as a project manager where I was the liaison between the clients, so leveraging those communication skills, but also working with the engineers to develop new ideas, new solutions, talk about prototyping within that company. So that's kind of how Smith+Nephew enabled me to be able to become a successful project manager, as well as learning the ins and outs of project management, right? So project management, including timelines, speaking with key stakeholders. Thirdly is understanding the budget and resources that are involved. And so that really kind of gave me a different perspective with regards to, what other opportunities are out there, and giving me a more well-rounded perspective of, I guess I would say, the business side, as well as kind of the industry itself. So as I talk about MedTech, it obviously enabled me to spread my wings beyond orthopedics, whether it was sports medicine or reconstruction, into kind of the MedTech realm. And so where I am today, I am currently at Intuitive. I am a product manager, and I'm responsible for the DV5 system. So in the bottom corner here, you'll see this is the DV5 or the Da Vinci 5 system. And so the Intuitive as a whole is a robotic platform, like surgical company. So with the Da Vinci 5 system, it has multiple arms where the surgeon actually sits at the console on the left-hand side and actually performs surgery as a robot is on the patient and moving around. So it's for minimally invasive surgery. It's a fantastic technology. It was launched last year. Actually, prior to that, even at the end of 2024 in the US as a limited launch, and officially kind of launched into what is the international markets now. So my responsibility within this role is any type of hardware updates, any changes to the system itself. I work with the engineers and be a voice of customer perspective for them so that they understand, what the surgeon is looking for and what I see in the OR. So I have the opportunity to travel and go into the OR and get to observe surgery. And then secondly to that, as I had mentioned, it was launched in 2024, end of 2024 in the US, but I'm responsible for OUS launches. And by OUS, I mean outside of the US, any type of international introduction of the Da Vinci 5 system into their market is my responsibility. So for example, last year we introduced it into Korea, officially in Japan, and then lastly into Europe. And into the various countries of Europe. Europe is obviously very big, but we're continuing to grow in that. And so, coming down the pipeline now, there's quite a few countries that we're entering into. Eventually, we're going to get into Canada as well. So it's very, very exciting. And overall, you can kind of see my journey has not been a straight one, as I mentioned, from product development to project management to product management, swinging from, from the upstream side, which is kind of the development, sorry, the downstream side, which is the product is developed, into where I am today, which is the upstream side in the new innovation space of product development. So hopefully that gives you a well-rounded picture of where I am today. And I would love to have, if there's any questions at all, I'm happy to answer it. There was a lot of content. But I do have a final slide, but maybe we'll ask questions first before I go into what my advice would be. Does anybody have any questions at all?
I think with the kind of a structure that we have, Jen, and just want to kind of be mindful of people's privacy, I'll have to stop recording before we start into the
Okay.
Q&A. Yes, yeah, they just wanted to jump into there. I saw someone kind of unmute the microphone, so I think there are questions, but if you're okay with that, let's finalize the presentations
Okay.
part and we can jump into the Q&A.
Okay, perfect. Happy to do that. So let me just finish off my presentation with things that I've learned and words of advice. So firstly, differentiate yourself from others. So when you're applying to industry, everyone's going to have a degree, right? Whatever opportunity you are applying for. So that's really just a check mark. I think what's most important is how you differentiate yourself from other applicants, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I talked about being a Western Mustang and being a varsity athlete initially, is because that's one of the things that differentiated me, is knowing as as an athlete and being part of a team, I have team experience, like team player experience. I have leadership experience, right? Being on the court, and discipline for going to practices and so on and so forth. So I think that's one avenue. If it's something that you're looking at industry and applying for jobs, I would say in general, not necessarily in the medical device realm, is how can you differentiate? And so another point to that is that I did an internship. And so from that experience, that enabled me to speak about, the FDA process and what my exposure to testing was. And so I think that is another another level that I could add on to my resume and be able to talk about in my interviews. And then lastly, I mean, for me, doing research at the Hand and Upper Limb Center, that also helped me with, leveraging me as to differentiate myself from other participants, because it showed, for example, when I was applying for orthopedics, it showed that I had testing experience in the orthopedic realm, had exposure in, an academic, from an academic perspective, and deriving test protocols and doing the testing and, reading journal articles, and even presenting at conferences, whether it was a poster presentation or if it was actually like a presentation, a 5-minute presentation on my research. So with that said, I think it's really important to differentiate yourselves, as I mentioned before, and how can you just showcase your skill sets outside of just a degree. Secondly is being vocal about your career aspirations. So what I mean by that is throughout my whole career, I've actually been able to get jobs through just telling people, what I'm excited about, what I'm working on. And from that, people have been able to kind of hone in on maybe some skill sets that I have and maybe new opportunities. So for example, as mentioned before, Dr. Jim Johnson, he knew that I wanted to go into industry because I vocalized it to him. And he was the one that connected me to Smith+Nephew. When it came to Veranex, what's interesting about that is my intern that I had at Smith+Nephew recognized, the opportunity at Veranex as a consulting firm. And he said, hey, I can introduce you to, the team here. And if you're interested, would you want to jump in on that? Right. And then also speaking with one of my mentors, which I'm a huge proponent of, as I was, in the project manager role, I mentioned, I kind of want to go into product management again. Right. And so that's how I got into intuitive. So with all that said, if you're vocal about what you aspire to do in your career and you tell people about it, there's a potential that they could suggest some opportunities for you that you're not expecting. And so that pulls into be open to all opportunities, right? You'll see that I've pivoted from product development to product management. That was a huge jump. And I basically took the risk, as I said, take risks and go for it, right? You have nothing to lose. Go try it out for maybe 2 years or more and see how it works out. Because if anything, it's a great learning experience. And so with that said, I mean, jumping from that to project, from development to product management into marketing, and then from that into project management, and then back into product management from an upstream perspective. These are all opportunities I wasn't expecting. And so don't close any doors. You'll never know what you're gonna, you never know what opportunities are going to present itself and if it's a good fit. And maybe it's not, and that's okay too, right? But just don't be too siloed in what you want to do. And then lastly, networking. Networking is just quintessential. And that's what I've learned throughout my career. It's great to get to know people, whether it's within your industry, outside your industry. For example, I talked about mentorship, how important that is for me in my professional career. I've always had a mentor within the company that I work in. Typically, it's actually somebody that's not within my department. So for example, here at Intuitive, one of my mentors is actually she's a VP of finance. So I get to actually talk to her, get her perspective from a managerial level, but also from a different eye when it comes to business units, right? What is finance? How does finance input into, the multi-port what's called organization? And so Da Vinci 5 or the Da Vinci system is within the multi-port system, right? So I get a different and clear perspective from that. But outside of that too, I have mentors that are either from previous companies or along the way I've met that people have introduced me to. And so giving me that perspective is really important. And through that, it's purely networking. So as I mentioned, my mentor was the one that suggested me to come here at Intuitive to work. So as you grow your network you should constantly be growing your network, but as you continue to grow that network, it's really important that if you're interested in a certain opportunity or a certain career path, leverage that network, because it could make a huge difference in your life as it has on mine. And so lastly, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I mean, you can probably tell as I've alluded to, it's been a journey. It hasn't been a straight road, but it's been a fun adventure and I've learned so much. And as I mentioned before, I'm incredibly grateful for all the people that have helped me along the way and making those career decisions from even just entering the industry to where I am today. And, every good or bad experience is an experience nonetheless. And I've been able to leverage all of those into, my accomplishments today. So very grateful to have that. And yeah, I think those are the main words of advice that I have overall. So I look forward to hearing some of your questions. And hopefully that just kind of gives you some perspective from an industry lens.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to stop the recording so we can jump into the Q&A.